It's been a hard day's night, and I've been working like a dog.
Are you ready to get down to business? Join seasoned entrepreneur, community leader, and Army veteran Scott Shalom Klein, who will take you behind the scenes with those who work in America's small business scene and speak with leaders making an impact, creating jobs, and telling their story in entrepreneurship. So let's get down to business. On AM 560, The Answer, here's your host, Shalom Klein.
And indeed, we're all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. In business, we talk a lot about business here. You're on with Get Down to Business, and I'm your host, Shalom Klein. Remember, you can always download podcasts on my website at syklein.com. While you're there, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at syklein. So I'm very excited for our conversation today. I'm thrilled to be joined by Henry Mintzberg, who has, believe it or not, been the author or co-author of 21 books. His latest book is Understanding Organizations, Finally, Structuring in Sevens. And before that, Bedtime Stories for Managers. I love the titles. So props to you, Henry, for whomever is involved in that. He is quite the impressive individual. And Henry, what I wanted to talk today is I know that we live in a world of organizations from the moment we wake up in the morning to check the weather on a radio station like AM 560 or until we get to sleep at night after uploading a deposit to the bank. In between, we're transported by subway, fed by a restaurant, work out in a gym. But do we really understand about those beasts? How do they work? When don't they work? And how do we make them any better? So again, Henry, welcome to the program. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Shalom. They work fine a lot of the time, but we don't understand the differences between them. So, we had a business school in Quebec where they appointed a trucking president as a dean, and he the good trucking professors left and the bad trucking professors stayed. We mixed them up. Professor at Harvard, very well-known professor at Harvard Business School, referred to hospitals as focused factories. Would you like to have a heart transplant in a focused factory? So we get them all mixed up every which way. And if you want to find out about yourself, you got a choice of 50 books in any bookstore. If you want to find out about the economy, read any newspaper, blog, whatever. But in between the sort of micro and the macro are organizations, and we live in them and function in them all the time. And yet our understanding of them is very primitive.
Absolutely, it's true. And, something I think about a lot, and frankly, we talk about a lot on this program, is about organization charts. Organization charts are very popular when you're talking about a business plan, when you're talking about nonprofits. Everybody wants to know that organization chart. Very popular with everybody, it seems, except for you, Henry. Can you explain a little bit about your philosophy on the topic?
Well, everybody except me and everybody who's subject to these things, it's as if all that matters in an organization is who your boss is and what department you're in. Where you sit in the organization physically can be much more important than who your boss is. If you're sitting on the top floor of an 80-story building, how do you get on the ground to find out what's happening in your business? Entrepreneurs are different in a way. Entrepreneurs connect. Typically, otherwise they're not very successful. But in big business, people just disconnect in all kinds of ways. And the chart is a big part of the problem, because you walk into an organization and say, give me a picture of this place, a big organization, and they'll give you the chart. And what does it really tell you? In most charts, unless the name of the company is there, you can't even tell what the company does for a living. A lot of entrepreneurs are too smart to have charts.
Absolutely. Again, I'm chatting with the author of Understanding Organizations, Finally, Structuring in Sevens. That's Henry Mintzberg. And Henry, it's a fantastic read. It's not as much of a book as it is a guide. You use a lot of metaphors in this great read. You talk about sports as an example. There's a lot of other areas which are discussed. But I guess I want to cut to the chase, Henry. Why are so many organizations in such a mess these days?
Well, I think a lot of them are following a model I call the machine organization, or the program machine. They're set up as bureaucracies, even though they have to be something different. A hospital can't be a machine. It can't be a factory. It has to be what I call a professional organization. And you get people coming in who don't appreciate the differences and think it's all about the boss and all about leadership. I'm Canadian, and in the States, here too, but more in the States, there's such a fetish about leadership. I'm a fan of what I call communityship. I think of well-functioning organizations create a sense of community, and leadership is there to enhance and build and support that communityship. So when the chief executive is paid 500 times as much as the workers, how can you expect anything but the organization to be a mess?
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more with you, Henry. You talk, on really this some of your observations from your time, and I know you've written or been the co-author of 21 books. So I want to take a step back for a moment, Henry, and just talk about sort of the lens that you wrote this book with. What are some of the things that inspired you to write book 21? And what are some of those? Where have some of those analogies come from?
Well, if it's actually book number 2 revised. I wrote the first version, give you an idea of how old I am, but I wrote the first version in 1979, and then I wrote a shorter version in 1983, and that's been my most successful book. But not successful enough because the general population doesn't understand organizations. So I thought I'd take another kick at the can and try and offer something where people can understand what organizations are all about. That's why I did it, and I think it's important. We live in, as you said at the beginning, we live in organizations. We're entertained by organizations. We're harassed by organizations, and we need to understand them.
Harassed by organizations, indeed. So, it's interesting. You talk a lot about organizations. Again, you talk a lot about metaphors with organizations. So, I wanted to use another, ask another question about what organizations are like. I mean, is designing an organization more of a science, art, or a craft?
It's not much science. It's a bit of art or some art. It's largely craft, and craft means trying things until you get it right. That's what craft essentially means. But how do we design organizations? I'm talking big ones now. We have people who are in sort of the top floor, what are called technocrats or analysts or whatever you want to call them, and they decide how you're going to interact with other people. Sometimes we build a park and we pave the way we think people should walk. And in Prague, there's a park where people are trying to get from a main road over a bridge, and they paved the park in an S-shaped thing. And so the people of Prague said, the hell with this, and they walked forward. In other words, the people repaved the park. And that's the way we have to design structures. We have to give people a chance to work out how they're going to work together, and then we can formalize the structure. But we're too quick to race into formalizing structures without checking with the very people who have to do it. Where people sit is more important than who they report to, because where they sit is who they meet at the coffee machine and who they bump into, and that's where they communicate. So we need to give more attention to that kind of thing.
Henry, we have just over a minute remaining, and one of the things that we like to do here on Get Down to Business is make this really, really practical. You, as mentioned, provide a lot of analogies. You certainly take your decades of experience and really, I mean this in the most positive of ways, dumb it down for any reader that wants to understand. But I want to know what you would recommend for our listeners that they put in practice, maybe in their small organizations, small businesses, but what can they do to make their organizations better in the week ahead?
Well, it sort of comes back to the book in a way, because you've got to understand your own form of organization. And the bulk of the book is about 4 very different ways to organize. And one I call personal, or the personal enterprise, which are entrepreneurial companies, for example. One I call program machines, which are McDonald's. Everything is programmed. McDonald's has us programmed. We clear our tables. Can you imagine? Can you imagine going into a gourmet restaurant and clearing a table? But a gourmet restaurant is a professional organization. It's an assembly of people in hospitals, in universities, in accounting firms, law offices, who work very rather independently and very strongly as individuals. And the fourth one is the project organization, where people, the opposite, where people team up. They're still highly skilled, but they team up and work together. If we mix those up, if you try and run a project organization like a machine organization, or try and run a machine organization like a project organization, or more commonly, try and run a machine organization,
Henry,
personal organization
let's
like a
let's
machine.
let's leave it there
Then
because
you're
I don't want to give away all the secrets in the book. I do want to make sure our listeners can get in touch with you and pick up a copy. Where can they do that?
Yeah, well, the book is obviously available on Amazon or from Barrett Kohler, the publisher, and they can reach me. They can look at, they can see my website with everything relevant, Mintzberg, mintzberg.org, and there's a blog called mintzberg.org/blog that I do regularly, so they can get more of that
Fantastic.
more of this on the blog.
Well, thanks so much for joining us, Henry Mintzberg. We'll be right back and get down to business.